My name is Emery, 36 years old. I'm a social worker and a single mother to a 7-year-old girl named Ava. That day was Thanksgiving, the first time I had brought my daughter back to my mother's house after years of distance. The family warmth, the smell of turkey, the laughter. It should have made us feel at home. But in the middle of dinner, Ava leaned toward me and whispered in a trembling voice, "If I sit too long, it'll hurt down there." I froze. The people around us chuckled, thinking she was being dramatic. But I saw the way her body curled in, clutching her stuffed raccoon like she was hiding from something invisible. Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace or standing against your own family to protect your child? If these words strike something in you, share your thoughts in the comments below. Tap like if you believe truth doesn't need permission to be spoken. And don't forget to subscribe, because what happened after that meal was just the beginning. I led Ava into the bathroom, gently closed the door behind us, then knelt in front of her. The light above the mirror cast a pale glow over her tense little face. She hugged her faded raccoon tightly, staring at the floor as if blinking might bring the fear back. I carefully lifted the hem of her shirt, my hands cold from the dread of what I might find. When I pulled down her leggings, Ava trembled in waves. Right along the inner crease of her skin was a pinkish-red irritation, a color no playground or tumble could cause. I swallowed, the metallic taste rising in my throat. My heart pounded so hard I had to place my hand on my chest to keep steady. "Ava," I whispered. "Does it hurt?" She nodded. "Who hurt you?" Silence. Then her lips pressed together like she was wrestling with herself. Finally, a whisper escaped. "He said I can't tell, or they'll take you away." Time stopped. "Which uncle?" She shook her head and buried her face in the stuffed raccoon. Her tears soaked the fabric. I didn't press further. I wrapped her in my arms and sat there for a long time, letting the warmth of my body ease the cold shaking through hers. When I carried her back into the living room, everyone else was still eating and chatting, like nothing had happened. My mother turned to me, frowning. "Emery, where have you been?" "The turkey's getting cold." I set Ava gently onto the armchair next to mine, draped a thin blanket over her legs, and looked at my mother without blinking. "She's not feeling well. I need to take her to get checked." Tessa set her wineglass down with a sharp clink, eyeing me like I had just said something absurd. "Come on. He's just acting out. Ava's always been overly sensitive. She's your daughter after all, and you work with traumatized women all day." "I'm not imagining this, Tessa," I said, my voice low and steady. "So what now?" Tessa crossed her arms, eyes narrowing. "You're going to call the cops during dinner?" I glanced around the table. No one spoke. Logan, my younger brother, avoided my eyes. He quietly spooned more mashed potatoes onto his plate like they might shield him from the tension creeping into the room. I noticed Ava clutching her raccoon tighter, her fingers pale from the pressure. My mother sighed. "Emery, you always make everything dramatic. I raised 4 kids. I know when one is just trying to get attention. Don't bring your job home, especially not today." I bit my lip. "I saw the redness, Mom. And I heard what she said." Tessa scoffed. "Kids say all sorts of things. My daughter once claimed she was a princess in the woods. What are you gonna do? Call the Royal Protection Agency?" No one laughed, but no one disagreed. Ava sat curled up next to me, eyes wide and unblinking. I took her hand, it was ice cold. I can't pretend I didn't see it. My mother laid down her utensils and tapped her porcelain plate. "So what do you want? To ruin Thanksgiving? To make everyone think this family is full of monsters?" My voice was quiet but clear. "If there's a monster here, I'll be the one to bring it into the light." No one spoke. Just the quiet clatter of cutlery, and the conversation shifted to safer topics. Dessert, Christmas lights, a TV show someone had recently watched. But I sat there silently watching each person. Watching my mother, the same woman who once told me to always stand for what's right. Watching my sister, the one I had held through her divorce, the one who now looked at me like I was the enemy. All because I believed my daughter. I looked at Ava. Her head had dropped onto my lap, eyes half closed. "We'll go soon," I whispered. "I promise." She didn't reply. She just pulled my arm closer around her. No one walked us out when I picked her up and left the table. No one called after us as I grabbed our coats, slipped on my shoes and opened the front door. No one stopped us. Outside, the early winter wind sliced against my face like blades. I wrapped the scarf tighter around Ava's neck, covered her head, and dialed emergency services. A woman's voice answered. Nashville Police. What's your emergency? I had to take a deep breath to steady my voice. I believe my daughter has been sexually abused. I need someone to come and examine her now. My words sliced through the night like an alarm, tearing open the silent wall my family had spent years building. I didn't look back again. I only looked toward the ambulance lights getting closer, and the little girl in my arms still trying not to tremble. I stood on the porch as the flashing blue and red lights swept across the pavement. Ava lay still against my shoulder, breathing shallowly, like any sound might trigger the nightmare back to life. The door behind me remained ajar, faint laughter, clinking silverware, and television noise drifting out from what now felt like another world. The ambulance rolled up the stone path. A female EMT stepped out first, a red medical bag slung over her shoulder. Her eyes met mine, cautious but kind. I pointed toward the door. Inside. My daughter needs a medical exam. She's 6. No further explanation was needed. At the same time, 2 officers exited the second patrol car. They approached, hats in hand, polite but firm. My voice cracked from fatigue. I'm the mother. The suspect is inside, the husband of my sister. One officer nodded. We'll take it from here, ma'am. I stepped aside, clutching Ava close. The EMT gently touched her forehead. Ava flinched but didn't cry out. Is she alert? Awake. But terrified. And there are signs of genital trauma. They exchanged quick clinical phrases and agreed. She needed to be taken to the hospital. I nodded. Ava clung to me, afraid of being separated. I whispered again and again, I'm going with you. I won't let them take you alone. While the officers stepped into the house, I stood right at the threshold, holding Ava, listening. As the door opened, I heard my mother's voice clearly. Oh my God, what is going on here? I didn't go in. I held Ava close and watched. The officers asked everyone to stay where they were. Tessa shot to her feet, her eyes wide with fury. Jonah was mid-pour with a glass of red wine, frozen like he had wandered into a scene of a movie without reading the script. Why are there police here? Who called you? I stepped inside, Ava still in my arms, looking straight at Jonah. I did. He raised his eyebrows. Emery, what is this about? One officer stepped forward. Sir, we need you to come with us for questioning. There's been a serious allegation involving child abuse. Jonah laughed like it was some bad joke. An allegation? Against me? Tessa jumped between him and the officers. No, absolutely not. There's some mistake. Jonah would never do anything like that. The police remained calm but firm. The child clearly stated the name of the person involved. We are required to follow protocol. My mother pushed forward, her face pale. Emery, what the hell are you doing? It's Thanksgiving. You're tearing this family apart. I turned to her, feeling every vein in my body tighten like piano wire. My daughter was abused. My child. 6 years old. And you're calling this tearing the family apart? You don't have any proof. She's just a child, maybe she imagined. I didn't imagine it. Ava spoke up, her voice tiny and shaking. The entire room went silent. She continued, face buried in my shoulder. It was Uncle Jonah. In the living room after everyone went to sleep. He said if I told, they would take you away forever. Tessa staggered like she'd been slapped across the face. Jonah shouted, she's lying. She's paranoid. I would never. The other officer stepped in, voice ice cold. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you in a court of law. The metallic click echoed as the handcuffs locked around Jonah's wrists. He thrashed, shouting, I'm being framed. This is a sick setup. Tessa screamed, Emery. You're insane. You're destroying my life over something a child said. I looked straight at her. Over something my daughter said. And because she dared to speak up when every adult around her stayed silent. They led Jonah toward the door. As he passed me, his eyes swept across mine, cold, black, and burning like they could swallow me whole. But I didn't flinch. I looked right back, holding Ava tighter. Tessa followed him to the door, screaming his name. My mother stood frozen, eyes vacant, unsure of where to look. I turned away and walked toward the ambulance. Ava gripped my hand. I don't want to go alone. I climbed inside with her. The seat shook slightly as the door closed. The nurse covered Ava's legs with a soft blanket. I looked out the back window. The warm yellow light from the living room spilled across the yard and over the confused faces inside. I saw something clearly. Family isn't who shares your blood. Family is who doesn't turn away when a child says they're hurt. Ava exhaled softly and she released the raccoon plush and rested her head on my shoulder. I gripped her hand, trying to keep my own breathing steady. I didn't know what lay ahead, but in that moment I knew one thing for sure. I had done the right thing. And I wouldn't stop. 3 days after Jonah was arrested, my phone went completely silent. No messages. No calls. Not a word from my mother, from Tessa, or anyone else in the family. I was removed from the group chat we used to share recipes, class reunions, and idle talk about the weather. The silence didn't hit like a punch. It came like water rising slowly to your neck, cold and heavy. But it was Ava who bore the weight of it most. She couldn't sleep soundly. Every night she crept into my room, tapping softly on the door like she was afraid of waking someone, whispering, "Mom? Are you still here?" I always lifted the blanket, letting her crawl in close beside me, her head resting on my arm like when she was little. "I'm scared I'll wake up and you'll be gone," like he said. I held her tightly, whispering into her hair, "I'm not going anywhere. No one's taking me from you." But even comfort has its limits. I could see the vigilance in her eyes never left. She didn't run around the yard like before, didn't curl up with her sketch pad for hours. Every time she walked out of her classroom, her eyes scanned the parking lot like she was searching for something she couldn't name. I started calling therapists. It took 3 tries to find someone with availability. On her first visit to the clinic, Ava didn't say a word. She only nodded when asked her name. But I saw her hands twisting the tail of her plush toy like she was trying to write something with her fingers. The counselor, Dr. Jacobs, was an older woman with graying hair tied neatly back and eyes full of quiet patience. She simply handed Ava a box of crayons and a blank sheet. "It's okay if you don't want to talk yet. You can draw." Ava lowered her head and began to scribble something. When the session ended, she didn't let me see her drawing. She shoved it into her backpack. On the ride home, Ava asked, "Did you tell her everything?" I glanced at the rearview mirror and saw the confusion in her eyes. "I only shared what was needed to help you. No one will know your story without your permission." She didn't say anything after that. But that night, Ava didn't knock on my door. She came in, climbed into bed, and whispered, "I dreamed someone pulled the phone cord." Everyone disappeared. I squeezed her hand tight. Her fingers were ice cold from fear. The next morning, after dropping her off at school, I sat alone in the living room, opened my laptop, and did something I never imagined I'd do to my own family. I created a folder named Case Files, Ava. I dug through old emails, texts, family photos from birthdays, holidays, anything that might show warning signs from Jonah I had missed. In a New Year's video from last year, I saw Jonah standing behind Ava, his hand on her shoulder for just a second too long. Ava tilted slightly away like she was trying to escape, then forced a smile when someone called her name. I paused the video. It felt like someone had wrapped a cord around my throat. I saved the clip and labeled it with the date and time. Not long after, I received an anonymous Facebook message. The account had no name, just a sunflower as the profile picture. The message read, "You're a sick liar tearing the whole family apart. I hope you rot." I didn't need to guess who it was. That tone wasn't unfamiliar. Aunt Cheryl, my mother's younger sister, was the first to call me a victim seeker back when I defended a classmate in high school. I took a screenshot, filed it in the folder. All day I couldn't eat a thing. But that evening I forced myself to make chicken porridge for Ava. She sat at the table, spoon in hand, but not eating, just poking at the carrots. "Mom." "Yes." "If they hate you, is it because of me?" I sat down and looked her straight in the eyes. "Ava, listen to me. No one is hated for telling the truth. They only hate it because the truth forces them to look at themselves." She blinked. "But why are grown-ups afraid of the truth?" I choked up. "Because sometimes the truth takes away the thing they want to believe is right." She nodded slightly. Then, in a whisper as if afraid to shatter something fragile, she asked, "If I'd stayed quiet, would you still have friends in the family?" I didn't know how to answer without breaking her heart. But I said, if you had stayed quiet, I would still have felt alone. But because you spoke up, I know I'm not alone. Ava didn't reply, just took a small spoonful of porridge. But her shoulders seemed less tense when night fell. And that night, as I turned off the bedroom light, she asked just one simple question. Tomorrow, can I draw another picture? Of course, I said. What do you want to draw? She closed her eyes and smiled softly. I don't know yet. But maybe it has a sun in it. Looking at her face under the gentle glow of the nightlight, I told myself, whether or not the sun was out, I would be the little lamp that stayed lit for her through every road ahead. That afternoon, just as I finished washing my hands in the kitchen, Ava ran up with a drawing pad clutched to her chest. She hesitated. Mom, I want you to see this. I dried my hands and sat down beside her. The paper was torn from a white sketchbook. The pencil and crayon lines were fresh, and the smell of wax lingered on my fingertips. The drawing was simple. A little girl curled up on a couch hugging a pillow. Behind her was a man with gray hair, broad shoulders, and hollow eyes, just two empty black circles. At the bottom, Ava had carefully written, Uncle Brian. My heart clenched. Brian who, sweetheart? I asked quietly. Ava didn't look at me. She just gave a small nod and whispered, the uncle who watched me when you worked nights. At Grandma's house. I froze. Brian was my cousin, almost 10 years older. He lived alone, never married, used to be an electrician, and in recent years had become a fixture at family gatherings. I'd asked him to watch Ava a few times 2 years ago when I was doing evening shifts at the emergency intake center. I remembered clearly, Ava was still small, too young for overnight daycare, and my mom was busy taking care of Grandpa who was sick. Back then, I had been so grateful when Brian volunteered. He once joked, kids are easy. Just give them cartoons. I'd never suspected a thing. Looking at Ava, I felt a guilt I couldn't even put into words. Can you tell me what happened? I asked gently. Ava hesitated, then shook her head. I just drew. Because I don't want to see his face anymore. I nodded. I didn't push. I pulled her close and felt her breath, thin as thread, against my ear. That night, once Ava was asleep, I opened my laptop and searched through old messages from Brian. Most were straightforward. What time should I pick her up? What does Ava like to eat? But one stood out. He texted, she's really easy. So quiet. I read that line over and over. Back then, I'd thought he was just praising her behavior. Now those words made my blood run cold. I couldn't sleep. At dawn, I called Sergeant Luring, the officer handling Jonah's case, and told him everything. He listened silently, then said only one thing, bring the drawing to the station. We'll take it from there. I went that same day carrying the sketch, printed text messages, and some old photos with Brian and Ava in them. The police opened a new case file. 3 days later, I got a call. Sergeant Luring informed me, we've just arrested Brian Douglas at his workplace under emergency order. Besides Ava's statement, 2 other children in the extended family have confirmed abuse at Grandma's house. I lowered the phone, my hands still shaking. I walked into the living room, where Ava was arranging yellow daisies in a small glass vase. She looked up at my face but didn't ask anything. I came closer, knelt down, and held her tiny hand. Uncle Brian won't be showing up anymore, sweetheart. Ava didn't speak, just nodded softly. But I saw her shoulders relax. That night, she drew another picture. It showed a large iron door with 2 men in blue uniforms behind it. On the other side stood a little girl holding hands with a woman, both smiling. At the top, in light orange crayon, was a sentence, no more fear. I held the drawing in my hands, my eyes burning. I used to think trauma came all at once and then passed. But it's more like cold water trickling over stone. Slow, silent, lasting. And Ava, through her seemingly innocent lines, showed me she wasn't just remembering, she was finding a way to move through it. I pinned that picture on the fridge, right beside a photo of me and Ava at the park from last week. She was smiling. Not fully, not yet. But genuinely. And something shifted inside me. A small, fragile sense of peace along the long road ahead. On Monday morning, I was brewing coffee when my phone buzzed with a certified letter from a law office. I opened the envelope, steam still rising from the ceramic cup in my hand. The words were sharp and clear. Tessa Rollins had filed for custody of Ava Rollins, claiming the current guardian, Emery Duncan, had engaged in psychological manipulation and parental alienation. I slammed the cup down so hard a light brown spill spread across the wood. Those words hit like a punch to the gut. No check-in. No remorse. Just threats and accusations. Ava came out of her room, hair tousled and feet wrapped in bits of blanket yarn. "Mom, do I need to wear fancy clothes today?" I smiled and forced myself to sound normal. "No, honey. Today we don't need anything special. Just be ourselves." After dropping Ava off at school, I returned home and opened my laptop. I called Lauren Pierce, the attorney I'd worked with at the Women's Center. She'd left government work years ago and now ran her own practice. When I mentioned Tessa and the custody suit, Lauren went quiet for a moment, then asked, "Do you have any proof that Tessa knew and stayed silent?" I hesitated. Then I remembered. Last week I'd pulled out Ava's old tablet from a drawer so she could draw while waiting at the clinic. When I turned it on, I saw an unnamed audio file. I tapped it thinking it was a recording from one of her games. But instead I heard my mother's voice. "She told you, Tessa. She told you back when she was staying at Grandma's." Another voice, Tessa, replied, quiet but clear. "I know. But if we say something, Jonah's done for. The whole family will go crazy." I had sat frozen for nearly a minute, unable to believe what I'd just heard. All this time they hadn't just suspected. They knew. And they chose silence. I immediately sent the audio file to Lauren along with a scanned copy of the lawsuit notice. Less than an hour later my phone buzzed. "Emery," Lauren's voice was firm, "we're filing for emergency custody. That recording is proof your mother and Tessa knew Ava was being abused and failed to report it, violating child protection obligations and showing how dangerous it would be to send Ava back to them." I straightened in my chair, taking a deep breath. "Are you confident the court will act quickly?" "I can't promise anything about the system's speed," Lauren replied, "but I know how to present this so no one can ignore it." I ended the call and opened the desk drawer, pulling out the case file that had grown thicker by the day. I added the audio recording to the evidence log. Every file, document, and note was numbered, color-coded, and arranged chronologically. I couldn't afford a single mistake. That afternoon when I picked up Ava, she handed me a drawing. It showed a small girl in a wide-brimmed hat standing between two adults. One was clearly me, brown hair, long coat. The other was a woman wearing dark sunglasses, with no mouth and her hands folded behind her back. Beneath the picture, Ava had written, "One protects, one hides." I held the paper, my throat tightening. "Who's this, sweetheart?" Ava didn't look up. "The one with the sunglasses. That's Grandma." I nodded. I didn't fault her. I never pushed her to recover faster than her heart could manage. But in those simple lines I understood more than any deposition could convey. Ava remembered. Ava felt. And Ava was beginning to understand. That evening Lauren called again. "Emery, I've submitted the emergency custody petition to the county court and delivered a copy to the Child Protective Services office. By law, they have up to 72 hours to hold a hearing." I closed my eyes and leaned back against the chair. Lauren continued more gently, "I know you're exhausted. But you're doing the right thing. You're not alone in this." I didn't respond. But inside I knew one thing with absolute clarity. The price of truth isn't just pain. It's isolation, judgment, and betrayal, often from the very people we believed would protect us. But no matter the cost, I would take every blow, because I refused to let my daughter grow up in a house built on silence. That morning, Ava wore a light blue dress with lace trim, the one she picked for school picture day, clutching her worn-out stuffed animal as she nodded when I asked if she was ready. I wasn't sure I could say the same for myself. Davidson County Courthouse stood like a monolith in front of us, its weathered gray stone steeped in decades of stories and silence. In the long, echoing hallway, Lauren's heels clicked steadily on the tile, while my own steps felt heavier, as if each one churned up the memories I wished I could bury. Ava squeezed my hand as Marcia, Lauren's associate, opened the courtroom door. The room was still, with no clacking typewriters like in the movies, just taut air and watchful eyes. Tessa was already there. On the opposite side, beige coat, gray skirt, composed face. Too composed. Next to her sat a middle-aged man with a slick haircut, silver-rimmed glasses, and a pristine leather briefcase. "Randall Kane," Lauren whispered. Lost his license for 2 years over manipulated evaluations. Don't worry. We're ready. Judge Harold, a man in his 60s with cropped silver hair, tapped the gavel. We're here to begin the emergency custody hearing regarding the minor, Ava Rollins. Petitioner, Emery Duncan, current legal guardian. Respondent, Tessa Rollins, biological mother. Tessa's attorney stood first. Your Honor, my client wishes to reaffirm her maternal rights. We believe the child is currently under the influence of MS. Emery Duncan's mental instability, including tendencies toward exaggeration, savior complex behaviors, and emotional manipulation. He gestured for Dr. Kane to take the stand. Kane began in a calm, steady tone. I've reviewed Ms. Duncan's social media, volunteer history, and medical records. A consistent pattern emerges. Someone with unaddressed personal trauma who positions herself as a savior figure. I remained still. Lauren simply scribbled notes, unbothered. Kane went on. In such environments, a child can become unconsciously influenced. Duncan may believe she's protecting, but in reality, she may be planting fear. Each word dropped like a stone in a pond. But I waited. When it was her turn, Lauren rose, voice clear and unwavering. Your Honor, we dispute Dr. Kane's claims with 3 specific pieces of evidence. She connected her laptop to the courtroom screen. First, the audio recording. My mother's voice and Tessa's came through the speakers, chilling in their clarity. She told you, Tessa. I know. But if we report it, Jonah's life is over. Silence swept the room. Kane lowered his head. Tessa pressed her lips together, staring at nothing. Lauren continued. This confirms not only awareness but deliberate concealment. Second, she held up a printout, Ava's drawing. It shows a clear understanding of events, not a fantasy, not a suggestion. She displayed the image bearing the caption, "One protects, one hides." Lowering her tone, she added, and third, we submit disciplinary records from the Nevada Psychology Board showing Dr. Kane's previous suspension for biased, unsubstantiated conclusions. The judge flipped through the file. Kane, do you currently hold a license in the state of Tennessee? Kane hesitated. I'm in the process of reapplying. The judge nodded and marked his notes. Lauren gave her closing. Your Honor, among all the documents, only one truth stands tall. Ava repeatedly expressed the desire to live with the one person who believed her from the start. If justice means protecting the vulnerable, then today, no one is more vulnerable than a child who had to speak the truth while the adults around her stayed silent. No one in the courtroom even exhaled. Judge Harold tapped the gavel again. The court grants full legal custody of minor Ava Rollins to Emery Duncan. Tessa Rollins and Ms. Carol Green are ordered to cease all contact until further court review. This hearing is concluded. I didn't leap to my feet. I didn't cry. I simply held Ava's hand, feeling her fingers squeeze mine. Just slightly, but enough to let me know. She heard. He understood. And from now on, she wouldn't have to speak the truth alone. One overcast morning, while Ava was at school and I was sorting old books in the home office, I accidentally knocked down a small wooden box from the top shelf. The lid popped open and a handful of yellowed letters slipped out like soft exhalations long buried. I crouched to pick them up and recognized the handwriting. My father's. He passed away when I was 21. Bold blue ink, steady strokes, a slight tremble near the end. I carefully unfolded one, dated 2 weeks before his death. It wasn't the usual well wishes or check-ins. Instead, the first line read, Emery, if you're reading this, it means I never got the chance to say this out loud. I sat on the floor, my heart slowing with each beat. There were things I tried to stop, but was forced into silence. Because of your mother, because of pride, because of pressure to protect the family name. I knew Jonah had behaved inappropriately toward another little girl, not Ava. She was the daughter of a friend. I almost called the police, but your mother stopped me. We can't let this get out, she said. I was a coward. I stayed silent. And I haven't rested since. I don't remember how long I sat there. His words burned like fire and froze like ice all at once. I searched further and found, tucked between a stack of papers, a photocopy of a police report, half a draft without an official stamp. A red ink note read, Victim withdrew the complaint, family requested internal handling. I typed the name my father had mentioned into my laptop. A small article on the local news site popped up. That year, a 10-year-old girl had been hospitalized for internal injuries and named Jonah as someone familiar. But the family denied it, calling it a climbing accident. The case was closed. No one was arrested. I leaned against the wall. The room suddenly felt smaller. The air thickened like someone had just slammed a door shut. I called Lauren. Her voice lowered immediately after I told her what I'd found. Emery, this is critical supplementary evidence. Not just for Jonah's case, but for establishing the liability of those who knowingly covered it up. I asked, do you think my mother knew back then? Lauren didn't answer right away. Then softly, I think if your dad said in the letter that she stopped him, then yes, she knew. And she made a choice. Just like she did this time. That evening, Ava drew a new picture. She stuck it to the fridge without saying anything. In the drawing, a man sat playing guitar with a little girl beside him, her hair down, hugging a stuffed bear. The girl was smiling. The guitar had the word "Dad" carved on it. I sat down beside her and pointed to the picture. You miss Grandpa? Ava nodded. He never scared me. I gently brushed her hair. You know, he tried to protect another little girl. But no one stood with him. Ava looked up. So, was Grandpa very sad, Mom? I replied, my voice cracking, maybe he was. But I think he'd smile now knowing you and I are being brave, together. She threw her arms around me. She didn't say anything more. But that hug, tight and steady, was all I needed in that moment. Late at night, after Ava had fallen asleep, I opened the old letter again and reread my father's words. I imagined him sitting somewhere watching all of this unfold. No longer silenced. No longer forced to turn away. And I had stood up, right where he had once been stopped. Outside, a light rain began to fall. Raindrops tapped against the window pane, steady like the rhythm of a heart coming back to life. I closed my eyes and I felt a quiet settle inside me. Not because something had ended, but because I was continuing what he had once begun. Our new home sat at the end of a quiet lane in the southern suburbs of town, with pale cream-colored walls, a chipped white fence, and the lingering scent of freshly cut grass in the air. It wasn't big, just 2 bedrooms and a small porch barely big enough for a wooden table and 2 folding chairs. But for Ava and me, it felt like a fresh beginning after too many stifling nights. On our first morning there, I woke to the sound of bare feet padding across the wooden floor. Ava was carrying a basket of seeds into the backyard, her hair in a messy bun, face glowing with a kind of energy I hadn't seen in her for months. I want to plant sunflowers in this corner and daisies along the wall, she said, pointing, then opened the seed packet and dropped each tiny seed into the holes she'd dug with a little green plastic trowel. I knelt beside her, gently patting the soil back into place. I want them to grow really tall, Ava said, eyes focused, so every time I look out the window I see sunshine. I looked at her small face and it felt like I could hear tiny sprouts growing from her voice. Inside, I let Ava choose the paint color for her room. She picked soft pink and covered the walls with her drawings. A house with a curvy red roof, a girl hugging a teddy bear, a wall bathed in golden sunlight and dreams sketched in colored chalk. I left it all just the way she made it. No corrections, no redesigns. I wanted that room to be a world where Ava could express all the things she hadn't yet put into words. That afternoon, while arranging flowers into a glass vase in the kitchen, I saw Ava standing in the doorway, holding a small worn handkerchief, her eyes hesitant. Mom. Yes, sweetheart. We're not going anywhere again, right? I wiped my hands on my apron and walked over to hug her tight. No, I whispered, we're not going anywhere. This is our home. A place where no one can silence you anymore. Ava pressed her face into my shoulder. She didn't speak, but her breathing slowly eased, as if she'd just released a fear that had clung to her far too long. The days passed like a quiet changing of seasons. Ava went back to school part-time 3 days a week. Every afternoon she walked out of the school gates with an empty lunchbox, cheeks flushed from the sun, and that shy smile I always waited for. Evenings were her favorite. I'd set out construction paper, colored pencils, and glue on the kitchen table, and she'd sit for hours making everything from a paper dragon flying past a full moon to a tiny boat with sails that read, "We are safe now," or a portrait of the 2 of us in front of our house, smoke curling from the chimney, flowers blooming by the porch. One evening, as I was putting away old case files into a cabinet, Ava quietly handed me a small envelope made from folded craft paper. Inside was a sheet of paper folded into quarters, with shaky handwriting in blue pen. "You are the gatekeeper for me, Mom. If someone ever knocks again, I'll hold your hand tight." I didn't say anything. I just pulled her close and held her like that for a long time. Sometimes I still dream of courtrooms, of my mother's eyes as she left the hearing, or the slam of a door from the past. But every time I wake, morning light spills through the window, I hear Ava's footsteps on the floor, the soft clink of a spoon against a bowl, and I know I'm still here, whole in my daughter's presence. I used to think a home was a place with sturdy walls, a secure roof, and a well-locked door. But now I understand. A home is where a child can breathe easily, where a mother can close her eyes for 5 minutes without fear, where drawings aren't just decorations, but stories told without words. And among the new buds in our garden, the smudges of crayon still lingering on the table, I see the light slowly returning, not brilliant or grand, but warm enough for the two of us to keep moving forward. That afternoon, as I watered the plants out back, Ava came running through the garden gate with a folded sheet of paper in her hand, her face glowing, cheeks flushed like she'd just sprinted the length of the street. She called out, "Mom, today, Vera let me read my essay to the class." I wiped my hands on my shirt and took the sheet from my daughter. It was school issue paper with a neatly written title across the top, "My Safe Place, Ava Rollins." I sat down on the wooden chair under the fig tree. Ava stood nearby, her fingers tightly laced together. I read slowly, word by word, as if each letter had been placed there with the rhythm of her own heartbeat. My safest place isn't the pink room or the art corner with all the pencils. It's my mom's arms. There I don't have to lie. No one makes me smile when I'm scared. No one says I'm making things up. My mom was the first person to believe me without needing proof. And because of that, I found the courage to tell the truth. I think a safe place isn't where there's no darkness, but where someone stays with you before the light comes on. I looked up, tears streaming down my cheeks without me realizing. Ava lowered her head, hesitant. "You didn't like it?" I pulled her into my arms and held her close, wanting to freeze that moment forever. "I don't just like it, I'm proud. Prouder than I've ever been of anything in my life." That night, after Ava had gone to bed, I found a thin envelope in the mailbox by the front gate. The handwriting on it hit me like a wave. It was my mother's. I held the letter under the soft porch light, my hands trembling slightly. "Emery, you were right. And I was wrong. I saw more than I ever admitted. I knew early on, but I chose to believe silence was protection. I was wrong. I didn't just hurt you, I hurt my granddaughter too. I will testify in court. Not to redeem myself, because I know some mistakes can't be erased, but because I don't want Ava to grow up thinking every adult turns away. If you'll allow it, I hope to visit you and Ava. Even just once. Mom." I sat down on the steps, the letter resting on my knee, while the night wind slipped through the cracks of old bricks. I didn't know if what I felt was anger, forgiveness, or just deep exhaustion. But somewhere inside I knew something had shifted. My mother, who once turned her face from the truth, was finally willing to face it. The next morning, Ava didn't ask questions when she saw me slip a letter into the mailbox. But that afternoon I found a small note she'd left on her desk. Just one sentence written in purple marker. "If Grandma wants to start over, I'm ready to draw a new picture with her in it." On a weekend afternoon, Ava and I walked under the oak trees lining the road, fallen autumn leaves brushing our shoulders with a soft rustle. She swung my hand gently, eyes following the golden patches of light breaking through the leaves. "What do you think about adding a wind chime to the porch?" Ava asked. "Up to you," I replied, nudging her playfully. "Just not too loud at midnight." She giggled, then tilted her head and said softly, "Bravery feels like this, doesn't it?" I stopped, gently squeezing her small hand. "Bravery," I said, "feels like staying." Ava looked up at me and her smile wasn't shy. It was the smile of a child who knew, no matter which way the wind blew, she had a place to come home to. A place where she didn't have to brace herself to survive. A place where courage wasn't about pushing through pain, but about daring to trust, to breathe, to hold someone's hand, and stay. Beneath the warm shade of the trees we kept walking. Neither of us spoke, but maybe we both knew. The road ahead would still be long, but from now on we wouldn't walk it alone. As I share this story, I know each listener will carry a different feeling: anger, compassion, hope, or maybe just a quiet ache for things forgotten. But I also believe there's a child inside each of us who still needs to be heard, a mother trying to protect, or a house waiting to be called by its true name, a safe place. What do you think about the journey Ava and I have been through? If you were in my shoes, would you stay silent to keep the peace? Or would you speak up even if it meant risking everything? Leave your thoughts in the comments, because maybe your story will be the light someone else needs. If you felt connected to this journey, tap like to give strength to mothers silently fighting for their children. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you can continue walking with us through real, emotional, and deeply human stories. Tales of healing after heartbreak, of courage born from the very places that once hurt the most. Thank you for listening. We're still here, still growing, day by day in a small house filled with sunshine and blooming flowers.